Thank you, Fiona, again for your kind introduction, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to our ICARDA session. We're all very happy to be participating and celebrating with you all Women and Girls in Science Day. So my name is Louise Sahan. I will be your moderator for this session on ICARDA Women from Field to Science to Field. During the next hour, we will discover the work of two eminent ICARDA scientists who strive to improve the livelihoods of dryland family farmers. So before I give the floor to Dr. Jacques Véry, ICARDA's Deputy Director General for Research, to present ICARDA's core mission and introduce our scientists, I would like to thank WIRES for organizing this marathon. And for those of you who do not know what WIRES is, or for those of you who just joined us now, WIRES is a newly established employee-led group whose objective is to raise the visibility of female scientists' groundbreaking research across all CGIAR's 15 centers. Since agricultural research for development is no different than other scientific fields in that female representation remains low, WIRES is determined to address this gap by placing women scientists and the transformative work they do in the limelight. So ICARDA is very grateful for the opportunity to showcase two eminent scientists, Dr. Dina Najjar and Mira Haddad, during this session. Before asking Dr. Véry to begin his introductory remarks, please know that if you have questions for either of us scientists, which we hope you do, you can type them in the chat function and we will address as many as we can during the Q&A session that will follow the scientists' keynote presentations. We also have, and we're very grateful to WIRES for this, an Arabic language, an Arabic interpreter. So please change the language channel if you'd like to follow our session in Arabic. Let me now turn to Dr. Véry for his introduction. Dr. Véry, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, all depending on where you are in the world. So my name is Jacques Véry. I'm leading the research, but also the capacity development and country engagement in ICARDA. ICARDA, the International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, is working on agri-food systems in the drylands and most especially in the non-tropical drylands in the context of the CGIAR. The research we do at ICARDA is of two different types that are complementary. The first one that I call component research, where we develop innovations on specific components of the agricultural systems, on the crops, for cereal, pulses, forages, cactus, date palm, on the livestock, especially small ruminants, and on soil and water. So in each of these components of the system, we have specific program to deliver and scale innovations. We also do a second type of research, which is called systems research, where we integrate, combine, synergize these different components in farming systems with farmers community, and also in the context of value chain. We are, as the other international centers, producing international public goods and using them to deliver innovation, transformation in partnership with farmers, community, value chain, stakeholder, and countries. And of course, as it has been already discussed today, even if we discuss about women in science, I want to remind in this context the importance of women in agriculture, in agri-food systems in general, and the role that they are playing and can even more play in the future as drivers of change. So about women in research and development in ICARDA, but also in the institution, different research institution with whom we are collaborating in the country. it's clear that there is still a large gender gap, both in ICARDA and in the national system in which we work, at senior scientist level, in the management of research. But there are also clear signs that things are changing, although it may depend on the scientific discipline, and it's clearly slower than we would expect. In ICARDA, we have managed to change, for example, recently, I mean, the role of women in the management of the center, but it's still, there is still a lot to do in the research management in the centers. Things are changing because, and I would like to focus on two aspects that are going to be, I think, well illustrated by my two colleagues who are going to talk. The first thing is we have more and more women in our PhD program. We have a large PhD program across the different countries where we work in partnership with university of the region, but also outside of the region, and especially in the Arab countries, supported by the Arab Fund for Development, and also from funds from Japan, for example. And here, I think we're trying to start from the beginning of the science aspects at master and PhD level. The second thing is the fact that we see now more and more women leading key research domains. May not be domains which are very well developed, but they are under development. So these 2 points give me things, we can be positive, but of course we need to be more, and this can be discussed during the presentation. So I will introduce briefly Dina and Mira, because they illustrate the two things I have mentioned. So Dina Najjar is a social and gender specialist at ICARDA. She has got his PhD in anthropology from the University of Western Ontario in Canada. And she is working as a socio-cultural anthropologist by training, but focusing on links between gender equalities and policies, agricultural technologies and delivery systems, rural employment and migration, adaptation to climate change and productive assets, and including, among others, which are the important aspects of land and ownership, and mostly in the MENA region. So she's working across a wide range of countries, Egypt, Jordan, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Sudan, and she has also conducted research in Uzbekistan, Kenya, Ethiopia, and India, and she is currently based in Morocco. She is also leading ICARDA research on gender, and she's our focal point for the CGIAR platform on gender equality, youth, and social inclusion. So I think she's a very clear representation of what I am saying of emerging leadership in emerging domains or increasing domains. Mira Haddad is a senior research assistant. She's doing special analysis and data management, working on the water, land, and ecosystem program in ICARDA since 2013. She holds a Master of Science in Environmental Science and Management, and she's specialized in spatial analysis and database management, and work with scientists in different projects dealing with soil and water management in several countries of the region. She's based in Jordan, where she also plays a key role in inclusion of rural communities in our research and inclusion of our research in the national strategy. She is responsible for project database in many projects, collection, analysis, curation, publication, development, and she is also very well versed in hydrological modeling for watershed, and you will have an illustration of that during her presentation. And on top of all of that, she is also doing her PhD in partnership with the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands, and in the context of a project conducted in Jordan. So I would say I'm very proud of having Dina and Mira to be today, sorry, presenting ICARDA in this discussion. So thank you for both of them, and I think they have more to say. And as I said, they are the future of ICARDA. I am not.
Thank you very much, Dr. Berry, for this lovely introduction. I hope everyone can hear me this time. Seems to be functioning good. So without further ado, I would like to turn to Dr. Dina Najjar's presentation. We have allocated about 8 minutes. So if it goes above those 8 minutes, I will let you know in a lovely way that you should wrap up. Dina Najjar, please, you can start.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here as well as an honor. So I will be giving highlights of my research. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay. So I basically work on two kinds of gender research. The first one is integrative research that is based on technologies. And this relates to gendered access, adoption, and what follows after adoption, the trade-offs and the benefits from these technologies. There's basically crop technologies, livestock technologies, and these technologies are very different. So water, for example, technologies are very masculine, as opposed to dairy technologies. They're very feminine. And the literature is quite, with regards to access, adoption, and benefits, particularly access. The gatekeepers are the bottleneck can be for the technology can be gendered, and it can marginalize men and women from adopting these technologies. Also, another kind of research that I work on is the strategic research, and this covers broader structural constraints such as the gender wage gap, or participation in the workforce, or participation in local governance. And of course, these two kinds of research are not mutually exclusive. So policies that address adoption also need to address land rights or employment. Next slide, please. The problems that I solve in my research are diverse. First off, I would like to highlight the importance of collecting sex disaggregated data, as well as its analysis. And that's important because livelihood experiences are subjective, and they are determined by gender as well as other forms of social identity, such as age, location, class. So we study this. This is important because the policies that we recommend or the technologies that we develop needs to be relevant for everyone. That's also important because when we look at, for example, in the MENA region, some of the sex disaggregated data was collected in the latest one was collected in the 1990s. And it's also mostly based on women heads of household, when we also need to talk to the majority of women, which are married women. The other issue why that's important to collect sex disaggregated data is to look also at risk experiences and perceptions. So for example, with regards to COVID-19, we recently conducted a study in Egypt and Tunisia, and we found that women are more vulnerable to COVID because they are more dependent on livestock, as well as they sell more frequently in small quantities in the market. And due to market closure, they are more affected. Men were able to store crops and defer the marketing. Also, we look at what happens before and after adoption, because often we just look at adoption and that's not enough. We also need to look at access to technologies, what is the context, and also what happens after adoption, because there could be some harms done, or often we see that men are able to take technologies further while women are adopting, but they cannot take it further. Other problems solved in my research are related to the structural barriers that I was talking about. In particular, we found that policies that give women land rights as well as seats in local governance are not enough. We also need to address gender norms. So for a very quick example, women that were given land, they bequeathed it to their sons and not their daughters. So this highlights the issue of addressing gender norms. Also, we work on reducing women's workloads. We see how we can do that through technologies or policies. And that's extremely important. The pandemic has highlighted who is doing the brunt of unpaid work. Also, I've worked in projects where one of the biggest problems with regards to gender is the low participation of women in development activities. So, for example, I've worked on projects where the women were almost 1% to 60%. So we work together with organizations and men leadership and women, integrating women in the project, because women for women to participate in projects, they also need chaperones in very strongly sex disaggregated cultures. Another issue that I have looked at is the famous paradox in the MENA and South Asia region, where women have gained increased education. However, their participation in the workforce remains extremely low. In fact, one of the lowest in the world. So again, this research has highlighted the importance of gender norms. Another issue that I have conducted in my research is the inter and multidisciplinary research to solve problems. So for example, in India, we have looked at the interaction between a new barley variety, which is used as feed, as well as new species or new strain of goats. So the interaction between the synergies between these two technologies was very powerful for men as well as women. The men were selling barley for beer, and the women were using it to feed this new livestock species. So it was a win-win with the barley crop and in synergy with also the introduced goat strain. Also, complex problems have no boundaries, and that's why it's important to do multidisciplinary research. Another issue is inside our own institutions. If we want to address gender issues, gender equality in rural areas, we also need to address it inside. And one of the things that I think I have contributed to is in many of my colleagues' projects, as well as my projects, I'm always keen on hiring women assistants, because as I said before, in very strongly sex disaggregated cultures, it's very difficult for men to collect data from women. And then it becomes a blind spot. Their world, the women's world, becomes a blind spot. And this can be dangerous because we can formulate policies or technologies that are not relevant and maybe even harmful. Next slide, please. So for the contributions, I think as an anthropologist and with multidisciplinary training in agriculture, I am able to understand both local people's perspective as well as scientists' perspective. So I can understand the jargon that is used by breeders, for example, like shattering, a molt variety, what does that mean? How that has negative impact on feed quality for livestock. Also because I am an anthropologist, we use methods that are interactive and adaptive. So we collect data based on building rapport with the people. So often we go back to the same site, and as such, we gain the trust of the community, and we are able to collect data that will be otherwise difficult to collect. Just a quick example, Margaret Mead, a famous anthropologist, says that what people say and what people do are different things. So in the field, I remember very clearly one time I met this family that kept saying that the women in his family do not irrigate, and that's a masculine role. It's men that do that. as I spent time with them, I noticed that the women eventually were irrigating. So that's important to do participant observation in order to, in gender research, there's what's appropriate and also what happens on the real ground. And often these are two different things. For the policy blind spots, I think the irrigation example is a strong one. We have shown that women involvement in irrigation is much higher than what is believed in policy circles in Egypt, as well as women's involvement in grazing is also much higher than is originally thought in policy circles in Tunisia. So they were involved in different ways. They were grazing their livestock closer to the homestead, not going for days sleeping outside of the house. So it's the validation that women need in order to participate in extension programs or in credit programs that is important to be realized for doing these roles. Also, our research.
No? I'm sorry, I will need you to wrap up now, so we have time for the rest of the program. Thank you.
Yeah, so also importance of mentoring the younger generation. They are extremely important in conducting literature reviews as well as collecting data, like I said before. The NARS, very, very important. I maximize on their own knowledge of the local regions. We design surveys together. Also, I really benefited from two major CGIAR gender working groups, Genovate, as well as the Gender and Breeding Working Group. It was very nice to work with the qualitative researchers, which I think is often marginalized. Also, I really appreciate working with my colleagues because often the methods, the research question determines the methods. So if we are measuring the gender wage gap, we need to work with economists. So I really value working with my colleagues as well as other development organizations. I'll give an example very quickly. We worked with FAO on operationalizing decent work for rural women empowerment. And the FAO worked at the policy level while we worked at the farmer level. And then we held together workshops with recommendations for Egypt. I'll stop here and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Najar, for presenting your work. Can I say how inspiring it is? I really hope that young and aspiring female researchers are logged in right now and listening to you, and that they will be emboldened to choose science as a career path after hearing about your achievements. So now I would like to move on to Mira Haddad, whose work in arid rangelands restoration is equally impressive. Mira, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Louise, for this nice introduction as well. Can you hear me? Okay. And thanks to Jacques for the lovely introduction. I'm really thankful for being part of the ICARDA family. ICARDA supports me in accomplishing my study and research to benefit the science for livelihood improvement and better ecosystem services. Part of my duties in ICARDA is, as Jacques mentioned, is working in the rangeland ecosystem, which is locally known as the Badia. The Badia is an area received 200 millimeter rainfall annually. Communities used the land mainly as herders. However, their lifestyle is completely changed due to political, economical, and natural conditions. The lifestyle transformed from nomadic to sedentary lifestyle. Since then, there are more pressure on lands and ecosystem transformed to degraded stage. Like images can talk more than me, like within a minimum vegetation cover is occurring in this rangeland. In summer times, the area is suffering from sand and dust storm. In winter time, with accountable rainfall event, there is runoff, leaving the land without benefiting the local community or increasing the productivity of the land, as well as increasing or foster the soil erosion. Next slide, please. In ICARDA, we try to restore the degraded ecosystem through sustainable land management practices. I will go quickly into this. We have established 2 technologies. In the upstream areas, we established what's so-called a micro water harvesting that we created in 30-hectare area. It's part of a bigger watershed, which is 1 square kilometer. The micro water harvesting was established using a Valerani machine, and we outplant each Valerani pit or micro harvesting structure with native rangeland species. Next, please. Additionally, we did in the lower part or the downstream of the watershed, we conducted a structure called Marab. Marab is being used now by local community for planting barley. The production of barley is almost 10 times more the normal production local community is practiced in the degraded areas. The Marab production now is around 5 tons per hectare, which is really impressive in such degraded ecosystem. I have to say, all the stages of site selection, implementation, and others have been done with the local community participation. Next slide, please. These are some images that shows how community and local community were involved. You can see in the site selection, we conducted like several meetings with local community, explaining to them what is the idea of our project, why we select this area, not the other one. And the community were in agreement that, okay, this could be a benefit for the community or for individual. This is also part of our, difficulties that we face in the field. Also, community were responsible for seed transportation from the nursery to outplanting of these seedlings at the field. Next, please. We, as a team, I'm talking about it's really like a huge team from water, soil experts to livestock and milk processing expert. Especially also, we have also gender, especially a specialist working with us on this. We worked hard on increasing community awareness toward restoration benefit, how we could improve the ecosystem services. So I'm not allowed to show women photos in my presentation due to cultural issues, but I have to say that I'm so proud of the achievement that we achieved in this community to form the first women association. We used the learning methodology of learning by examples. We managed after 1 year of arranging this meeting and field trip of the women from the field to go and visit another, let's say, a women association and convince them that they can develop themselves, they can increase and participate in their income. In addition, we conducted training, as you can see from the images, for men and women men and women from the community, plus the schools. I'm not sure if it's clear on the first line, the picture on the right. There is also school teachers who also are part of the development and capacity for the whole community to be convinced that we need to manage an integrated approach the ecosystem, as well as as well as the community has participated in the local community members is participating in establishing a biophysical monitoring campaign, which is related to soil, erosion, water movement in the field. So they helped us a lot in installing the equipment in the field. Even they are now helping us to improve the not improve, I mean to monitor and sending us the data, especially during COVID-19. We did not have access to the field, but we have a trained local community there who could send us. Even the community, the women group, they kept calling us. So I am really thankful for this community and their collaboration, because whether they are youth or men or women, they all wanted to keep the project ongoing and the research ongoing. Next slide, please. So the whole idea of our working and restoring ecosystem or rangeland ecosystem in Jordan is, can we restore the equilibrium phase of the ecosystem? So for sure, we're doing field implementation, for sure, we are doing community meetings, but also there is a science behind all of our work. For example, this is like 2 paragraphs showing, like, with field monitoring and modeling, how we can translate like local community engagement to something tangible. For example, like how our restored site could reduce the runoff amount and soil erosion. This also translated to numbers. So we work for the livelihood and also we work for science. So, and I'm pleased also to say that the Jordan government recently has a speech by the Prime Minister where they wanted to outscale our technology across the country in lands that owned by the government, which I think this is a great achievement for ICARDA and all my colleagues who's working in this field. So we hope to return the degraded ecosystem to an equilibrium stage. And the last slide I want to show you, these are 2 images, one from, let's say, end of summer and one during spring, just to show you how the site looked like after 4 years of restoration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mira, very much. This is really impressive, the difference on those two pictures. Thank you for telling us all about your work, and just wanted to say that your passion and dedication are very communicative. So thank you for this. We'll now quickly move to the second part of this session, which is mostly question and answers. So obviously we have received already some questions from the audience. If there's something you would like to ask either of us scientists, please use the Q&A box and we will try to ask your question. Before we move on, I actually have a very quick question and I would love for you, Dina, to answer briefly. I wanted to react to what you said during your presentation. You were talking about the interface between technology and gender, and briefly explained that dairy technology is more a female technology and water is more masculine. And I was wondering if you could just maybe briefly explain this to us.
Yeah, I think water is one of the most there's one of the most established literature on gender and technologies in regards to water. It's very masculine, and even when women are doing water irrigation, they're not recognized in their roles. And also, as such, they do not get to participate in local governance institutions, such as water user associations. And even when they get the training related to water, it's often related to domestic issues like keeping the river clean. So yeah, and I think it's tied to the land, and it's also tied to the technical aspects of irrigation. The pump, it's also sometimes in some cultures, it's tied to getting your clothing wet, and that's not considered appropriate for women to roll up your sleeve because in some regions they use flood irrigation. Dairy is something that women is in their traditional role. So making cheese, different kinds of cheese, or the fat separator, these are all technologies that they can adopt and use and generate income from. But other technologies related to water, for example, the access is more difficult for them because they don't get the training. They're not calling the shots on the water schedule. They're not in the water user associations and so on. So you can see very different gendered context for the technologies.
Thank you, Dr. Najjar, for this very interesting answer. I would like to now move to Mira, there's actually a question from someone in our audience who's wondering how, when you're doing your research in the communities, in the field, how do men react to you being there? How do they generally treat you? Do they take you seriously? Are you seen as a threat? Do they recognize the importance of your work?
Well, I can say about the experience here in Jordan. You know, it's culturally, it's difficult to be a girl or a woman in the middle of I don't know, maybe 20 men. It's difficult, but I think the title that I have and the support that I receive from my colleagues in the field, they give me the floor to speak, or they ask me, or they say, let me ask Mira or something. They give me a credit in front of such communities. I don't say that this is wrong, or I don't here to judge any community thought, but I think it's not the right way, because if, like, men in general, they need to give the opportunity to others to speak and to act. But I have to say as well, there is also some members of community, men, they respect me. Actually, they listen to me, and sometimes I received calls from the community head or like family. They are asking, can we do this? Can we establish this? Can we have this tree type in our garden? So I think you face like the positive and negative attitude at the field.
Thank you very much, Mira, for this. I will now move to Dr. Najar again. I would like to know what sort of access, because there are challenges to being a woman researcher, to doing field work, but what sort of access does this give you with the broader rural community? And what sort of information have you been able to collect that maybe a male peer would have been unable to?
Yeah, I think that for women, it's not difficult for us to collect data from both men and women, but for men, it can be challenging to collect data from women, especially in cultures that are strongly gender segregated, such as South Asia and the Middle East and other cultures. So I think that's an advantage. My gender gives me an advantage to access both the word of man and woman. And when we go and do field work without hiring women enumerators, we might only access one side of the story and unconsciously marginalize 50% of the population. But I also think sometimes I am viewed as a sociological male because I'm a professional, I'm doing research, I'm asking questions about agriculture. So sometimes I am not viewed as, like a traditional woman per se. Like I'm like an exception, and that's unfortunate. It should be, of course, not an exception or like, a man and like a male woman. But I think that's how people view me, as a male. Yeah.
That's very interesting. Now I would like to take a bit of a higher look and turn to Mira. So globally, training women in science is not the issue. I do believe that there are more women actually who graduate as scientists than there are men all over the world. However, what seems to be difficult is to recruit them and then retain them in scientific professions. So how do you think organizations can do better, and what can be done to just basically stem this loss of women power? Sorry.
Yeah, an interesting question, actually. Thanks. I would say like having maybe the system to be more flexible to the lifestyle of a woman. You know, as a woman, you don't have only the responsibility of doing the science or the field work only. You have to come back to your family. You have, if you're married, you have kids. If you're not, you have your parents. It's vary, but I would say like having a flexible system, like at work, that adapt to the needs and understand the daily life of being a woman, because you know it's hard sometimes for a woman to handle all the apples at one hand. So I think flexible system, also surrounding by a colleague who appreciate that she's extraordinary in doing maybe field work or in doing research or maybe in writing publication. So I think the system is supporting the women also to complete and keep going on. I would say for me, and as an example, ICARDA supported my master's study and supported my PhD, which is I'm really thankful for this. But without ICARDA, I would not be able to complete it either financially or workload. So I think such systems will help a woman to grow.
Thank you, Mira, for bringing this from like a global to a more personal perspective. I think this is really important. Dina, I will now to turn to you, and maybe Mira could say something about this as well later. I don't think I'm entirely wrong in saying that young girls, but also maybe aspiring female scientists and girls struggle with low confidence levels. A lot of them do not feel that their aspirations to become scientists is necessarily extremely legitimate. So how do you think we could help with this?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think mentoring is important, and being brave, even if you don't, you know, the famous fake it till you make it, or like being brave, having good mentors, accepting challenges, standing up for what you believe in, or also, I guess, getting enough support, because the more accomplishments you are able to get, the more you're going to gain confidence. And to do that, you need support with your, like Mira mentioned, the workload, your colleagues. So it's really important to, I guess, ignore your feelings or your beliefs and just keep focused on the goal and the challenge. And slowly, the confidence is gonna build up.
Thank you, Dina, for this. Mira, I have a question for you from one of our attendees, Boubacar Dehibi, who is actually working with us at ICARDA. He says the critical role women farmers play in helping ensure global food security in the agropastoral farming system is well known. Yet it is hard to argue that integrating or mainstreaming gender into agricultural extension services will not add more to this objective. Yet with your experience in Jordan and across Arab countries, what could be the best practical framework to help integrate gender into extension? It's a bit of a technical question, but I hope you can keep it simple for our non-scientist audience. Thank you.
Many thanks, Dr. Boubacar, for a strong question, actually. Everyone knows in Jordan, like if we're talking about specifically in Jordan, like we have really a strong scientist at the national system. And we work with them. They are brilliant, let's say, scientists. And bringing this to the farm level, or let's say more and more expanding this, I think we need, like, I just need to mention like one example. I never saw a Minister of Agriculture from a female group or a Minister of Environment. So I think we need to be, we need to train to be leaders. I think we need to be given more opportunity to lead, to manage, and this is not easy. It will not be easy acceptable by the community, or maybe sometimes by the family, let's say the small family itself. Sometimes they do not accept this. Let's move to the community or let's say the country level. So I think it needs education as well as, let's say, capacity development at the management, like how to manage, how to lead, how to become a leader.
Thank you very much, Mira. Dina, would you like to quickly react to this as well?
Yeah, and I can only agree with what Mira is saying, that leadership is very important because, again, if you are a woman leader, then you'd be able also to understand the issues that both men and women face. I guess can I also answer two other questions that came up, or are you going to come to them?
No, I think you absolutely. Go ahead.
Okay. So Jane asked the question if when I'm in the field, do I face backlash from men or suspicion, I think the word that was used, that I want to work with women, or yes, I do. And I learned with time to avoid that. I think that what we also want to do is women's empowerment. So we are both working with both men and women, but also we are looking at gender equality, at reaching gender equality and women's empowerment. And the way to do that is to is to frame it in a way that is good for everyone. So if it's irrigation, women are also doing it, and sometimes it's really nuanced, and it's not just because the men are jealous. It's sometimes, like in the case of irrigation, they were ashamed to say that their women are irrigating because that's supposed to be a man's role. So it's not always a zero-sum game argument. Sometimes it's more than that. It has to do with masculinity, with men wanting to do roles that women are doing, that they should be doing, especially in societies where the ideal is cloistering of women. We have a word called satita. It means, like she's the boss in the house. So it's not outside, not working outside. So I guess employment is fine, but there's some, it's accepted. It's not that regressive woman to be in the house, but it's for masculine tasks in particular. That's not very, it's shameful for men to acknowledge it. So I guess just being there and confronting them about it in a subtle way, because I'm there. The nature of the work that I do is based on long-term interaction with the community. Like I would spend 10 days in the field. I wouldn't go back to Cairo or whatever the capital is. I stay in the communities. So I'm there, I'm seeing things. So I think that's how I deal with it. And also I'm respectful, I engage everyone. Like I remember one time a man said, "Can you please wear a veil while you are here?" I did that. So just being respectful of the culture, not marginalizing anyone. And then just being really believing that what you are doing is about women's empowerment and gender equality, even though others might disagree with you, which is unfortunate.
Thank you, Mira, and thank you for the person who asked this really interesting question. This was a good one. I would like to direct this question at both of you, but maybe we can start with Mira. What sort of advice, if any, would you give a younger version of you starting their career in science?
Yeah, I would say believe in yourself. Don't be shy. Take the chances, and you will do it. And I would say don't listen too much to what other will tell you. It's from the context of what Dina just explained, because there is many, let's say, options that will stop a woman from being the effective member of a community as she dream of. So just be yourself, have a faith in yourself, and you will achieve it. I hope it's encouraging thing. It's not like
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely, it
that's good.
is. Thank you, Mira. What about you, Dina?
Oh my God, that's a difficult question. I also agree with Mira to believe in yourself no matter what. And also, I think what I would tell my younger version of myself is to have a better work-life balance, because when you have that, you are more productive. And I think it took me a while to realize that. Yeah, like having hobbies, I think that will make you a better, more interesting person, more productive. So that's the advice.
Thank you, Dina. I know that we've managed to talk for about 40 minutes, 54 actually minutes, and not mention the pandemic, but I do feel that, especially for women scientists, it makes sense to address this. So first Mira and then Dina, I would like to know, how has the pandemic and the injunction to work from home affected your ability to obviously do field work, but also do submit abstracts and papers as you normally would?
It's for me and Dina. I can start. I would say it is not easy working in COVID in home, especially if you have kids with online schooling. It's really hard to focus, and having a good internet connection all the time is something, a blessing, I would say, these days. Well, it is affected in a way that we become so stressful, and especially in the time of schooling and so on. And the way of us doing the work, like we have to be more on online, on meetings online, or we have to be more on calls or video calls with local community, because like for example in Jordan, we had like in Jordan like a long time not being able to go to the field, either by the government lockdown or community refused to receive anyone from Amman or something. So it was a little bit hard. For sure, myself, I increased the working hour, but we were able to do the research. And me, myself, I am very thankful to the colleagues, to the community who makes the data collection at least possible in a way that we say, okay, we've collected some data, we did not lose the season, or we did not visit the field. We, thanks to technologies that we are able to have some videos or photos from the field. It affected, but we did it because I think the system also of ICARDA is very supportive, working from home, flexible working hours. It's also an advance to us, like for sure you have to be online for like a certain hours, but you can also complete your work after the working hours, because everybody has this changed lifestyle as well.
Thank you very much, Mira. What about you, Dina? How has the pandemic affected your work?
Yeah, a lot. I think that in many ways, first off, I miss my colleagues and the small interactions in the hallway. It's energizing, and that's not there anymore because I need to prioritize my safety over other things. And then I think for me, I switched to research on COVID per se. And there were really interesting work that I think happened because of that. Like, for example, we found a very large gap in phone ownership for women, and a lot of extension services have moved to SMS, at least in some countries, sending messages. And then as we distributed, I mean, very little, we distributed 150 phones to women. But it's like just realizing how technologies can marginalize women instead of what is, I mean, I'm sure nobody's out there to marginalize women, of course not. But yeah, that, and also the radio. We are also doing messages over the radio, so we've adapted to the context. But I also agree with Mira. In Egypt, they were very, I mean, I didn't want that for people to do fieldwork, but they chose to do fieldwork and they collected the data face to face. And I'm grateful for that because I think the quality is much better. The privacy is much better with the face to face data collection. I've had 2 assistants who got COVID. Both of them thankfully recovered. But one of them, it took a long time and I was really worried about her. So it's just very anxious, very alarming signs, very alarming times. So yeah, it's good and bad.
Well, thank you for this. And I'm going to sort of wrap up on a more hopeful note now. Someone in our audience, an anonymous attendee, said, I'm so proud of you, ICARDA community, women and men. It reminds me of Aleppo Center that's closed now. Thank you for your effort, respect. So that's lovely. Thank you for this. I think it is now time for me to wrap up this session. So I would like to thank all of you panelists, Dr. Veri, Dr. Najjar, and Mira Haddad for your incredible contribution and very interesting comments throughout during this session. And I would also really like to thank the participants for joining us, for sending questions, for being interested and curious. So I think I will now pass on the baton back to Fiona. Thank you very much for this session, and please follow up on our work. Goodbye.